Okay, good morning. Monday, November 1st. This is the beginning of week 10 of a 15-week class, which means that the class will be over before we know it. So good time to take a look at what's left. In some ways, very little, in some ways, a whole lot. So November 7th, which is a week from yesterday, there's two things due. The first is the last of the projects, which of course is numbered project 1, and it's a point of sale system. We've looked at that already. If anybody has a question, I'd certainly be happy to go over it. It takes some time. And looking ahead, it's also the root of assignment 7. So in assignment 7, we take project 1 and we extend it to use file IO. And take a guess at what our subject matter is going to be for this week. It's going to be file IO. So, I'm not completely disconnected between my course content and the assignments. The other thing we're going to do this week, and that's going to require me to do some setup, we're going to do a final project check-in number 1. This basically is show up with something and you get 100. So this is not meant to be a critical review of your final project. It's meant to be, I guess, it's meant to be a check-in. What have you got going? What are you concerned about? Are you stuck any place? And those kind of issues. 2 weeks after, we'll do our second and last check-in. So that's what's coming up. I'll probably do what I've done in the past is set up a viable schedule for me on youcanbookme.com and then send out a reminder that that's the easiest way to make these things happen. If you have very little to say and everything's going fine, this is probably no more than 15 minutes. If there are a couple of details that you want to talk about, then clearly it could take 30 minutes and on up from there. So we will try to get all of those done. We certainly have enough time, I think, in my free time this week to get all of those done by Sunday. I'll try not to do them over the weekend, but if we got to, we got to. Okay, so on that subject of final projects, I don't know if you do, but I tend to keep, I have to tell you what the score is in terms of how many people have submitted things. So you can't keep track on your own. Final project proposals. Right before class, I noticed I had 13 of 21 submitted. Not good for the other 8 people. So as you notice, this class is going to shift away from these lectures and away from assignments and towards finishing up your final project. So all of the time down here to the end is really spent getting your final project to a point where it's presentable. So there's a bunch of weeks dedicated to that. And needless to say, it's very, very hard to be working on that if you don't have an approved topic. So just because you think you have a topic and it's okay to work on it, it's not unless I've formally approved it. If you don't have a topic, you've got an even bigger problem. So that's up to you. I promise that I will not be knocking on doors, following up on final project proposals. That's not the way it works. So if you're in that group of 8 that hasn't submitted, no more, no less get accepted, hasn't submitted a final project proposal, if I were you, I would take it with great concern. Project number 2, which was due yesterday, I had 9 out of 21 people submit things on project 2. I'm pretty good shape and being caught up on my grading. So, I may be a day or 2 behind, but probably not more than that. Okay, so any questions on what's upcoming? Anybody who's on now want to talk anything about the point of sale system? I think that if you have questions, other people might have similar questions.
What is a check-in The final project check-in, the one due on first.
The check-in is a Zoom get-together for probably at least 15 minutes to talk about how's it going. So how's it going usually means, you know, I'm on schedule, I'm confident, I have, you know, I'm stuck someplace. I tried to use this library and I couldn't get it to work. I'm not sure how to do this feature. It's, as I said before, you might have joined us a little bit late, show up and you get 100 for the check-ins. So it's not a critical evaluation. It's really a checkpoint to say.
It's not a submission, right? It's just
not at all, no. You probably want to submit. I'd have to look. I think you can submit things into D2L for the final projects. I would say if you haven't done so already, a good thing to think about would be to submit at least a some kind of a sketch of your layout or layouts. So I would expect if your final project has been approved, which has been, you know, that's been possible for several weeks, that you would at least have gotten up to sketching out what you're going to do. And as we've said before, that's an excellent first step to writing code. So if you haven't presented a bunch of details about what you're going to do, that would be a good place to do it. To say, you know, here are all of the features that I'm going to implement. If you want to have a section there, if you submit something that says I'm stuck on, or please, let's talk about ... that would be fine. So it's not formal, but it has to be done. It's actually given some amount of points as a grade, not many, but some. And as I said, show up and you get 100. And then we'll do that again on November 21st. So those students whose plan, in quotes, is to do their final project on the weekend before it's due, generally don't meet with success. The students who plug away at it over a matter of weeks tend to achieve most, if not all, of what they wanted. And occasionally you find out that, hey, here are a couple of extra features I'd like to add, but at least what you're committing to in the proposal should be close to what you delivered at the end. 100%, not necessarily. And when you make your final presentation, you always start on a, this is what I did, as opposed to starting with, this is what I didn't do, or this is what didn't work. So you can always say in your final presentation, I intended to do this, but you lead with, this is what you accomplished. Any other questions?
So what all does the final project presentation entail?
Well, I like to do it face-to-face, but we can't do that. So I would say some kind of a narrated video of 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. 5 minutes is probably too short. After 15 minutes, you better have something very interesting to say. The content of it should be, this is what I set out to do. This is what I achieved. This is how I did it. These are some of the a few, not all, a few interesting parts of your code. Because if you do all your code, it tends to get pretty boring. This is where I got stuck. These are my shortfalls. And if I had more time, I would have ...
What if you're done with the 10 minutes?
Excuse me?
What if you're done with that under 10 minutes?
Your final project is probably too simple. No, I mean, if you end up at 8 minutes, no big deal. If you don't get to 5 minutes in all those different things that I've just covered, you're either not going into enough detail or your final project was way too simple. So in theory, you will have had, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. I'm just guessing. I don't have the calendar right in front of me. Let's say you would have had 6 weeks to work on a final project, and you know it's the most significant part of your grade. If you can't talk about that for 10 minutes, I question about whether it's a good final project. I mean, you get to show it, talk about it, show it, look at a little bit of code, discuss interesting things, discuss shortfalls. Yeah, you know, I'm not going to kill you if it ends up to be 8 minutes. If it ends up to be 2 minutes, something's wrong. And even if it ends up to be 5 minutes, I think something's wrong. In addition to that video, you need to submit all of your work. So you need to submit any code that you used. Within your code, or at least within the submission, needs to be references to anything that you acquired off of the internet that you then adapted, so that you tell me that you've done that rather than me figuring out that you did it. We can go over that in a little more detail, but basically it's a presentation and code. And I'm pretty sure, I didn't look at it, haven't looked at it for a while, that the presentation also gets posted into a discussion group. And then you're asked to comment on two people's presentations. And that's handy because we're not doing it face to face. When we do it face to face, there's a couple of nice things. One is that you get to practice presentation skills in front of people. And the other is people get to ask questions. So since we can't do that, we'll do the best we can between Zoom and a discussion board.
So
I mean, we could try to let people join in a Zoom presentation, but I don't think that's going to be effective.
our project proposal one and two final project section supposed to be a video that's 10 to 15 minutes long. Is that
No, just the actual presentation.
okay?
The
What about
actual
the-
presentation, like presentation review. I seem to be. Oh, okay. Final project presentation. So this thing will get submitted by December 5th. And I guess the week before, we'll clarify that schedule, but in December, that's when everything has to be ready and you need a video presentation.
Okay.
And of course, your code needs to be as finished as it's going to be finished.
But on like for the check-in 1 and 2, I mean, so we're just supposed to print out like the code we already did that by that point?
Not necessarily, no. It's more, if we have a discussion for 5, 10, 15 minutes
Mhm.
about where you are and, are you making progress or are you stuck? What I'd like to see, especially for check-in number 1, is either a screenshot or something that shows what your screen layouts are going to look like.
Okay.
So you should have at least planned this out as far as knowing what the screens are going to look like.
No,
Do you
no,
need the code? Not necessarily. Should you have the code before check-in number 2? Probably, but I don't necessarily need to see it unless you want me to see it. But you should certainly have screenshot kind of layouts done this week. And you should certainly have at least those layouts written up in PyCharm by the second one. And by the second one, you should have a good start on your event handlers.
Yep.
But it's nothing formal. It's, let's talk about how things are going. It's not you make a presentation. We just have a talk about how things are going. All right? Anything else? Okay, let's move forward. So why are we here today? Because it's between 8:30 and 10:20 on Mondays and Wednesdays. No, we're here today because we have really just one module left that we haven't gone over. A couple of others we've kind of put into other things, and that's fine. But one major module that we haven't covered, and that's file I/O. And file I/O solves a very important question that I'm surprised hasn't come up yet, but now it will come up. And the question is, how do I keep my data in between the times when I run my program. So you know, or you should know, that variables and data structures are all held in memory related to the program when it runs. Program stops running, that memory is all released, and there goes all your data. Well, clearly there's all kinds of programs where that's just not acceptable. In the trivial case, what was my high score on this game? Well, you're not going to start at the beginning with 0. You want, and when you finish the game, you want to store your score and bring it up when you start your game as here's the score to beat. The general phrase for this, I would say, is data persistence. You want your data to outlive your program. And the other thing that you want to do here with your file IO is either to present or preserve the data. So let's say I have sales data. What else? Reservation data, attendance data. All of those kinds of things may need to be saved, and they may need to be transferred to something outside of your program. We can't do that unless we learn how to read and write data. And the first way to do that is in a text file. And the easiest way to do that is on the same computer that our program exists on. And that's about as far as we get in this course. We're not posting data out to the internet or even to shared drives. So all of that's possible, obviously, because it happens every day. So text files, that's how we start. So a text file is anything that can be read by a simple text editor, and at least in the Windows end of it, Notepad is usually everybody's example of a simple text editor. You don't need Microsoft Word or equivalent. There are no bolds and italics or fonts or anything like that. It's just plain text. Typically in Windows with a .txt, well, I guess typically not only in Windows, with a TXT extension. So text files are readable by anybody who knows how to read basic text, and Python does. Next step up, which we'll get to either the end of the day today or on Wednesday, are called CSV files, comma separated values. That exists basically for, well, not. That exists to support some amount of structure in your data, because CSV stands for comma separated values. On each line in your file, you have comma separated values. On the next line of your file, you have more comma separated values. Put them all together and they look like a spreadsheet, or they look like a square or rectangular area of data, which is what we've been talking about previously. So this discussion is all going to flow very well after our discussion of data collections. So CSV, text means you can look at it in Notepad, and compatibility with Excel. So Excel will read and write CSV files. You want to get fancy in Excel, there are things you can't do in these files. So then you typically write what is an XLSXS file, and there are third-party libraries in Python that can read and write those files. But we only get as far as CSV files. We're going to cover, just because it's built into Python and it comes in really handy, and it's a library called Pickle, for reasons I don't understand. Anybody who, I guess I haven't tried to research it. A pickle file is not a text file. If you bring it up in a text editor, you'll see some of your data, and you'll also see some unreadable garbage. And what happens in a pickle file is that it's good for preserving objects. Well, what kind of objects would you like to preserve? Well, how about lists and dictionaries and things like that? Things that are not just data, but they're also organized data. So if I write out that organized data in text, I'd have to recreate the organization if I needed it again. In a pickle file, it goes out there with enough information that when you read it back, you can restore your whole object. So take a dictionary, a complex dictionary, I write it into a pickle file, my program starts up or another program starts up, it reads it, and I guess it's unpickle, not really, it's pickle.load and pickle.save. But you unpickle the file and you restore your whole dictionary. Fourth up on the list, if we have the time and if we have the interest, it's almost a trick question. The question would be, what is the best place to store your data? Anybody want to guess? I guess not. How about a database? The reason it's called a database is because it's a great place to store data. Why? Because the data is very structured. The data is very portable. The data can be accessed very efficiently. So people have databases that run terabytes of data in them. And if they're designed right, they run efficiently. If you want to think of large databases, think IRS. Somebody like that who has data about everybody who has either earned money or paid money or taxes. So we can explore that right within Python. And the reason we can do that, and I know that some of you are taking the database course, so you kind of know what this looks like from the database end, or as we like to call it, the back end. We can create some front ends in Python and in GUI 0 that let you visually see what's in your database or visually create items in the database. So I'm not promising you how much we're going to cover that, but we do have the time, so something we might cover. But let's start out easy. And this is very easy. This is, excuse me, fairly easy. If you remember your friend and mine, Wal Pontal, who wrote this Python 3 cheat sheet. And down over here, bottom of the second page, he put in a fair amount of space into talking about file I/O. Thank you, Laurent. And once you see what's going on here, this tells you just about everything you need to know about what we're going to do. It's just a little weird. So he's introduced us here to the idea of open. We haven't seen that concept before because our program created everything it needed. We needed a variable, we create the variable, we initialize it. We need a list, we create the list, we put things in it, we take things out of it. The file is really external to the program. So we need to make a connection between a data file and something in our program, and that's called a file handle. That's what's over here. Aside from that, this is just an assignment. And for the, 57th time, an assignment says, evaluate the right side of the equals, and whatever value comes back, plug it into the variable on the left side. So what this does is it really returns an object that is a file handle connecting F to file.txt in write mode, and don't worry about the encoding. If you don't go down that road, you can ignore it. So that establishes F as an object, which can be called a file handle. And with that object, we can do things like f.write, f.read, blah, 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 and a bunch of other stuff that we need to see. We also see down here called very common, opening with a guarded block, automatic closing. Well, that comes with several different names. It's sometimes called a resource manager. I think more in Python and Java, it's called, oh no, I think I got it wrong. In Python, it's called a context manager. In Java, it's called open with resources. The idea is kind of the same. It's somewhat of a more modern way of dealing with these file handles. So obviously it forms a data code structure. ends in a colon, and it has a new word with in it. The open statement is the same as F replaces this F equals. Then once we get into it, we can navigate through the file. So we'll look at that. This is recommended because if we use this method, then we always have to be concerned about closing the file. And we don't need to be if we use this method. As he says here, it's automatic closing. So, merci, Laurent. So let's take a look and see where we can get to with this in the time we have available. Here we are on November 1st. So just remember, if you're thinking about November 1st, think about pretty much this time in December, your final project's going to be wrapped up. So it's easier if we look at writing first before reading, because if we do, then we have something to read. So let's start there, and let's say we're going to call this writing demo 1. And I'm not going to do anything in here that isn't explained either on the cheat sheet, in D2L, or easily available on the internet. So this is going to be pretty darn generic stuff. I don't see any reason that you need to copy the program. I think it's much more interesting to watch, and it's not a very big program, to watch the program and see how it's put together and how it works. But there's not that much to it. So let's see, do we want to commit to a main method? Why not? We'll commit to doing it the right way. And we have some messages that we want to put out in the file. And the first message is the rain in Spain stays or falls? I don't know. I wrote stays, but maybe I looked it up at one point on the plane. Or planes. I don't remember which. Okay. So that's from My Fair Lady. And I think we already talked about that once. We probably used the rain in Spain stays mainly on the plane. And just consider yourself fortunate that I'm not going to attempt to sing it for you. No one expected what? What did no one expect? Monty Python fans. No one expected the Spanish Inquisition. One of their most famous bits. Which I probably didn't spell right. So if you've screwed up your spelling, let PyCharm correct it for you. If you have a name that is not recognized in the dictionary, add your name to the dictionary and then it won't complain. So what is this? This is the text to be written to a file. There's nothing fancy about the text. We're going to go for plain old text file. So now we need the file handle. Create file handle for writing a text file. Give it whatever name you want, including Charlie. I don't care. File underscore out equals open. And open takes a whole bunch of things. Way more than we want to look at there. Start with the name of the file that you're going to write. Data.txt. And then it also takes a string, and we're going to always just put 2 characters in the string. The first one is going to be either R for read or write, or W for write. The next character is going to be T for text or B for binary. And we're starting out with text files. Now that we have a handle, write 2 lines to the text file. using the handle file out, we just do write. And we say, what do we want to write out? Well, we want to write out message 1. After that, we want to write out message 2. Okay. And now we have to remember what Laurent warned us about, that it's a good idea to close, well, it's required, kind of in quotes, it's required to close the file handle. Okay. And that's easy enough, file.out, file_out.close. Okay, do we get a check mark? We do. Why do we have to close the file? A couple of reasons. One is that if another program would try to write to the file while we have it open for writing, it would probably get a "you can't do that" message. The other is that now that we're writing stuff out to text file, to disk files, that's kind of expensive compared to dealing with variables, expensive in CPU time. So what the computer and Python together, or the operating system and Python together do, is they buffer the information in memory until there's enough to write it out. Has anybody ever yanked out a USB stick without ejecting it and found out that your USB stick got screwed up? Anybody want to admit to that? Good. It can happen, especially if you're writing stuff to the USB stick. The reason it gets screwed up is that you're not guaranteed that all of your memory buffers are flushed until you go into Windows and say eject device, and then it makes sure. That's the same concept at file.closed. It makes sure that all of the buffers, any buffers that haven't been written out, get written out. Now, reading, you can usually get away with it, because why can't two programs read the same file and there is no buffering going on? But anyway, this is the right way to do it. So let's see what happens if we run the program. All right. So we're going to run the program and look over here and see if you see something happening. Anybody see anything happening? Nobody's awake? Okay. Be that way. I saw something happening. I saw a file pop up here that didn't exist before. The name of the file happens to be data.txt. Well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? The way that open for writing works is if the file doesn't exist, it will be created by line 7 when it's run, and it will be created in the same directory that your program is running in. So that's the way writing works. What about if the file exists already? The answer is, if it's opened in W mode, the information in the file is lost and you rewrite the file. If you open it in A mode, I should have mentioned that. W for write, A for append, R for read. If you open it in append mode, your data will be added to the end of the file. So hopefully everybody's excited to find out what's in the file. PyCharm recognizes a TXT file as something it can deal with. And if we click on it, that's what we got. Not exactly what we wanted or expected, because our 2 lines of data are all on 1 line. So what we've learned here is that when we write out text strings, we write out text strings, right? So nothing in this string said go to the next line. This is not the print function in Python. which is smart about things. This just says, write this out. So what to do as part of our string, we can put in a new line character. And see if that helps. And it does. So that's what we expected. We expected to see our two messages put out into a text file, one message per line. All right. Let's extend this demo a little bit and make a couple of changes. I'm going to make the file name a global. Data underscore file, because I'm going to use it again, equals a string, data.text. And that means down here, I can use my global constant.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when you just did that, that wrote over the data file?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it
And that's
doesn't,
because
it
it's
doesn't add to it, it just writes over it?
That's what W mode does.
Okay,
If I change it to A and run it, then I should have two instances of my data.
okay,
So your choice. You're trying to create a log. You probably want to append. You're trying to just create this data file. You just use W. If you want to protect a file from being overwritten this way, you can check for its existence before you overwrite it. But that's a little fancier. So,
What does the T stand for in WT?
Text. Yeah, it just means plain text. As opposed to B, which means binary. So examples of binary files are docx, xlsx, pickle files are binary. Things like SQLite that work off of a single file database, those are binary. So binary has to have an understanding between who wrote it and who reads it. So you don't expect Excel to read your docx files. If we're keeping it simple, which we will for text files and CSV files, then just a plain old T will do you fine. All right, any other questions? Okay, so the reason I did that is we can just, while we're here, we can extend this to try to recover our data. So we're going to write two lines. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What am I doing? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I lost track of what I was doing. It happens. Yeah, no. We're not going to read the data back. I want to show you another way of writing the data out to the file. So we're going to write the same two lines to the text file using print. Good old print. We know all about print, don't we? Turns out we don't. There's things we don't know, things that have been held a secret. Any problem with printing message 1? No. Any problem with printing message 2? Of course not. Any problem running the program? I hope not. And we just print those out. Well, yeah, we print them out, but now we've got a blank line over here. Why do we have a blank line over here? Because we had to put the \n in here, but that's something that print automatically gives us. So what if we don't want print to do that? Well, I think we've seen this before when we're trying to print out two-dimensional arrays. There's an end equals. And if you set end equal to nothing, you suppress its desire to add a new line. So this says after you print it, don't do anything. And there it is, it did nothing. But that's not why we're here. This is stuff that we learned kind of one of the first days that we started doing this. We're doing file IO. So why am I showing you this? Because what I haven't shown you yet is file equals. What about if we say file equals not the name of the file, but the handle? What is the handle? The handle is file underscore out. If we give it a file handle, then print knows that the output doesn't come down here. The output goes to the file. And we know that that file has already been opened. So of course, we don't have to do that again. We just write the stuff out to the file, suppressing the \n that we put in here to make this happen. So if we run this, nothing down here. And what's in our data file? 2 lines of code. Why did I double click that? Why are there 2 lines of code there? Because we wrote 2 lines over here, and then we wrote 2 lines over here. So if print does something that you like, you can use print just as well as you can use your handle.write. It's not a big deal. Your handle still appears, but it appears in here in a file equals thing. Okay, so now we know how to write the file and we know how to deal with a mysterious new line or lack thereof. So that's file writing demo 1. Yay. Questions? Comments? Obvious, not obvious. Why are you doing this? Why can't we go back to the good old days when all of our data disappeared when our program ended? We're good? Okay, so one more pretty little program and then a break. Guess what? If we did the file writing demo 1, it's time to do the file reading demo 1. And we're going to define this global variable again, because it's not a bad idea. Have it at the top of your program. It really is not a bad idea. And notice that PyCharm figures out that this is a possible thing you're trying to do, which is pretty clever of it. So it gives you that as an option. Okay. All right. We kind of have to go in the opposite direction here. We have to go file underscore in will be the name of our handle. And what, excuse me, what we're going to do is we're going to open the date. Oh, I love it, but it's giving me too much information. We're going to open the data file. We're going to open the data file in read mode, and we're going to make sure that everybody agrees it's a text file. All right. Now I have a problem. And the problem is I don't know how much data is in that file. I actually have a bigger problem that I don't know if the file exists, but we'll deal with that afterwards. Since I don't know how much data exists in the file, could be 0 lines, could be 1, could be 1,000. I'd like a data structure that I can extend. And everybody likes lists. So I'm going to create an empty list. Probably I should comment that. Probably I should comment the whole thing. Probably I should put it in main. Store. Store. Add. Okay. There's numbers of ways to do this, but I want to show you the most general and what I think is the easiest. For line in file underscore in colon. Now you should recognize that as a loop, right? We could go back. What did I do? Did I close that? I guess I did. If we go back here and we look on the second page, this looks like for variable in sequence. In other words, whatever I have here has to be an iteratable. No, iterable. There we go. I finally messed it up. It has to be iterable. We have to have a concept of beginning, end, and everything in between. So it turns out the file handle fits those needs. It has a beginning, the beginning of the file. It has an end, the last line of the file, and it will be happy to iterate over every line in the file by just writing line 10. So this is a beautiful thing because in the next line, we're going to say saying dot, should that be plural? Probably. Saying, sayings. Because we could have many sayings in there. Dot append. And what are we going to append? We're going to append the variable line. So this works like magic. It gets one line at a time by using a for in, and it uses the file handle as an iterator. At each line in the file. And I don't have to know how many lines are in the file to make this work. So when we get done, let's see what we got. Okay, let's get another space in here. And it's all good. All right. Okay, so here's our, well, okay, I messed up the name, but that's okay. I should have called this the file writing demo. File exists, right? Right. What's in the file? What's in the file happens to be 4 lines. Well, that's okay. So let's see what happens when we read them. Okay, what do we see when we read them? Well, we see a list, correct? We see a string that includes a new line. We see another string, we see a third string, we see a fourth string. So out of this append, we ended up with a list that has 4 strings in it. Each string has a backslash n in it. All right, well, that's true, but it's not very pretty for non-computer people. So we know that lists are iterable. So we know we can write for saying in sayings. And we can print the saying. And I hope that, you all see now that saying is just a local variable in here, and one at a time, it's going to take on the value of every item in the list, which should be 4 items. So we expect to see 4 things printed. And we do. That's the good news. The bad news is that it has a space after it. Why does it have a space after it? It has a space after it because the strings had spaces after it. We saw that before. So what can we do about that? Well, we can say very nicely that now that you have a string, that's what saying is. Saying is a string. I would like you to strip the last character off the string. So R strip means strip from the right. And if it's empty parentheses, it will strip, I believe, whatever it finds. You can clarify it. Return copy with trailing. Oh, okay. So it considers that \n to be a white space character. So white space characters in general, things that don't print. And now when we run it, we've recovered the thing that way. Could we have done just end equals nothing? Let's try that. Saying end equals nothing. What would that give us? Same thing. So it's kind of your choice. It's probably good to know that R strip exists. But either way, we can get back something that we expected. All righty. I guess I'm on a roll, so maybe take another 5 minutes here. All is not well with this program because some clot have gotten in here and deleted the text file. Now I'm going to run the program. And it's going to throw an error. And the error is a file not found error. Error number 2, no such file or directory, data.txt. Well, that's absolutely true, isn't it? So Python is telling the truth. What we need to do if we're going to open a file for reading, and there are reasons to do it for writing too, is our friend try except. So all of this might fail right here. And if it does, there's no point in doing the rest. So we're going to come back here and write an except. Except as what? Except as a file not found error. And I just want to show you something while we're here. We'll pick up an object here called E out of that exception. And we'll do 2 things. One is that we'll just do a regular old friendly print. So we're going to print a formatted string that nicely says error, colon, file. And here we're going to print our data file name, not found. And then just to see what would happen, what happens if I try printing E? Let's see what we get. So here's our message. Error, file data.txt not found. Taking a clue from E, they claim that this would look nicer in quotes. Well, I can do that, but I'm going to put it in double quotes because or I'll put it in, okay, have it your way. I'll put it in single quotes, but if I do, I have to change these to double quotes so it won't get confused. Okay, and now when we run it, we've essentially created a friendlier message than the standard error reporting that we get out of printing E if we pass this along. So this is usually what we'd end up presenting for a friendly message without going on to the E. So now we have a program that protects itself from not having data. The same issue would come up if for some reason For some reason, we went back and created our data. And now we went into this program and we screwed up the name for some reason. So it will tell us that it will tell us, what did I do? Oh, I didn't execute this program. It'll tell us that data x.text is not found. So either it doesn't exist or you've misspelled the name. Try except file not found error is the key to success. I would do this when you're writing the file. Why? Because when you write the file, this doesn't have to be a simple file name. It can include path information in it. And if it did and the path didn't exist, you'd also get an error trying to create the file over here because you'd be trying to specify a path that doesn't exist. Let me just make a quick mention while I'm here. To specify path information, you can actually use forward slashes. So if my intent was to put this into a subdirectory, let's build a directory called data. And I'll get rid of this. And here I can say in the directory data, write a file called data.txt. And it will, I hope. And there it is. There's our file. If I told it to write data into data X, I'll get an error. It's also a file not found error. So basically couldn't get there because it didn't have a directory. So notice that I kind of glossed over this. I used a forward slash where we know that Windows uses backward slashes. Turns out you can get away with it. It'll interpret it correctly. If I want to use a backslash, I have a problem because it says, oh, \D. What does \D mean? What did I do? Huh, why did that work? Okay, now we know it's a good time for a break. I'll figure that out over break. What I was expecting to have happen is that it would say, I don't know what \D is. And what you see when you look up how to do this, it says to use a double backslash. But that's an issue for a little later. Okay, so we're going to call it 9:30. That means we get back at 9:45. And what we will do then is we'll look at the quote, right way, unquote, on how to get away with this without having to close the file using what I think is appropriately called in Python a context manager, which was mentioned, of course, in the bottom of the sheet over here. He calls it open with guarded block, but I'm pretty sure other people will call it context manager. Doesn't matter what language or what words you use in Python, it's going to look like this. So we'll do that after the break. All righty, so I will. All right, welcome back. So over the break, in addition to my getting something to drink and getting a little snack, I took a look at this where we were kind of stuck. I was trying to explain to you why \D was not a good idea. And PyCharm knows. It says \D is not a valid escape sequence. What's interesting, though, is that it actually works. So if I execute my file writing demo, I get a file over here that that works. So the right way to do it is to put in 2 backslashes. That's the acceptable way to do it if you're going to use backslashes. I think a better way to do it is just to be Linuxy about it and put in a / and then everything's good. And as I said, if we have a name over here of a directory that doesn't exist, we will throw an error, which we should have protected with a try except. Okay. Old way, it works, you'll see it, but we have better ways of doing this now. So let's try again with a new file called file writing with context manager. And this, I think, is the preferred way, and I guess it's preferred because it's shorter, there's fewer lines, and we don't have to remember to close the file. So we'll do this a little quicker and dirtier, forget about our main function. But I want to show you something while we were here. I want to show you a poem. And what do we know about poems? We know that they can have multiple lines, right? That's one of the things we know about poems. And we don't necessarily know how many lines. So what I really want is I want to create a string that is composed of multiple lines of text. And I can do that by using triple quotes. And that's what triple quotes are really supposed to be. We use them as multi-line comments because we never assign them anything, but they actually define a multi-line string. And if I want to continue the string on the next line, I can do that. And now on line 2, I can write as many lines as I want. So let's write a poem. And anybody who knows the correct end to the poem is welcome to contribute it if you can. There. Okay, does anybody know how the poem ends? All right, so because of language decency requirements, I can't tell you, but you can Google it. So there's a style of poetry called limerick, and for reasons that are not obvious, typically limericks are supposed to be either completely dirty or at least double entendres. So therefore, we won't finish it. And limericks also have a very strict rhyming pattern and beats per line. But anyway, that's not why we're here. We're here to write this out to a file. And this is the recommended way. And I don't care if you call it a context manager, if you call it write with resources, it all looks the same by the time it gets to Python. With new word, open, old word, name of the file, poem.txt. How are we going to open the file? Well, write text. And now we need to establish a file handle, and the way to do that is with as and the name of the handle, file _out. Software container, container of code, so it ends in a colon and it has indentation. Use our file.out to write. What do we want to write? Well, just one string, which is the poem. And we've got a check mark. So let's go for it. So we're looking for a new file called poem.txt, which we can bring up here. And now we have successfully recovered a multi-line string. So part of the string is the new lines, right? We can see the new lines quite clearly in our text file, so it's all good. So we can get rid of this, we can get rid of this, and we're just dealing with this. Okay. We should rigorously use a try except here, but we'll save that for the next example when it's more likely that we'll have a problem. So this, I think everybody would agree, is a lot cleaner. With means we're going to use this context manager. This is what we're going to do with it. And we're going to have an object created as a file handle called whatever you want it to be called. And then indented in here is all the stuff. Okay, so now if we can do this, we need to be able to turn this around and read. So this is file reading with. There's nothing to say that you have to use this context manager for reading and writing. You know, if you use it for one, you have to use it for the other. It's just you might as well be consistent. And I just find it has all advantages and no disadvantages. Home.text. We'll put a name in here. Not. And we know that this can go wrong if this file doesn't exist. So we might as well put a try in here because we know that that doesn't look right. There we go. We'll put a try in here. And now we're going to write the same, essentially the same thing with open. What's in the data file, we're going to open it for read as a text file. We're going to give it a handle that we like. And that is a code container, so it ends in a colon and it has an indent. And now we're going to do for line in, file in, for each line in file in, what do I want to do? I want to print that line. Unless line 5 fails. If line 5 fails, then I don't want to do any of that. I want to do an accept. What am I going to accept? A file not found error. And I'm going to do the simple print in a formatted string error. And if you're writing a big program, you should kind of be consistent in the way your errors look. You know, is it an error? Is it a warning? File. And this is the data file, not found. Actually, if you're being professional about your errors, there's a Python module called logging that lets you establish error levels like final info, error warn, things like that. And it lets you set up multiple sources of logging these errors. So maybe you want to log only some things to the screen. You want to log severe ones to one data file and other things to another data file. So if you really want to get into that logging in a more serious way, you can check that out. Okay. So this should do it. Another couple of blank lines here, just to make it happy. Happy? Happy. All right, let's run the program. And of course, by now I forgot what it was that I was doing. Closed but no cigar. We have those blank lines in there again because of print. So this time, let's go back to the other technique of saying, well, just strip the character, the non-printable character off the end of it. And now we've recovered our file successfully. And I hope that at least one person has Googled the end of the poem, which they can't share to us because some people might get offended. And we don't want to do that. Right. And it doesn't always have to be a man from Nantucket. There are other ways of creating dirty limericks. Okay. That should have gone on my objectives list for today, right? Learn about dirty limericks. Okay, so this is preferred. This is the reading version where we just with open RT as something. Loop through this iterator because that way you don't have to know how many lines you have. I presume that this will report out an LEN as to how many lines are in there. Oh, we got some time, we can try it out. Print. Nothing like trying things where, oh, it doesn't have an LEN. There's probably another way to do it. File in dot. Line buffering, line, blah, 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 new line. Okay, I give up. I don't care how many lines are in there. For line in file in handles the situation regardless of how many. Of course, I can always count how many lines are here, but I don't really need to do that. Okay, questions? Since I'm sure some people joined a little bit late, did anybody have any questions on what was coming up next, the point of sale? Anything anybody want to talk about that exercise? It's not an easy exercise. It needs to get done in pieces. Get one line working and then get your other lines working and then get your total working, and then get your output window working. It's one of those.
I have a question about that try command.
About what?
The try command, because I was trying to use it in one of my assignments and I couldn't figure it out. I looked on the GUI Zero website and I couldn't find anything on the try command. Is there some place we can look it up?
Yeah, any place other than the GUI Zero website.
Oh, yeah, because it's not a, okay, I'm slow.
Yeah, try except has nothing to do with GUI Zero. It's Python. So you could probably find it on W3 Schools under maybe exception handling. You could definitely Google Python or Python 3 exception handling. So
All right.
try except is called an exception handling structure.
So because that file in is an iterable, can you cast it as a list directly?
I think you're asking, yeah, I don't know. We do have, let's see, we have some things coming up. Certainly not today. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's something I'd have to play with. We will see other ways of creating lists, either probably next time. No, maybe today. See how, probably not. Yeah, there's a thing called list comprehensions that create lists in a very one-line oriented way, much like the conditional expressions do, but I'm not sure. And I think there's more going on here than just saying that this is an iterable. It is, but it's a special kind of one. It's a file handle. So as far as I can see, this is the simplest way of reading as many lines as exist out of a file and doing whatever you want to do with them. I haven't seen anything simpler than that or fewer lines. All right, any other questions?
I have a question about the point of sale project.
Sure.
So I'm trying to get it to, the buttons to work, the push buttons, when you are adding an item,
Yep.
and I'm kind of stuck and it's not working right. Would you be able to go over how to do that?
So let's discuss what we have there. The minus and the plus are both push buttons, agreed?
Yep.
So there's either one or two event handlers, either a shared event handler or two different event handlers. And the thing in between is a plain old text field. So it's like txt_count or something. We know its value is a string, right?
Right.
And we know that what we want to do is we need to take the string, convert it to an integer, so we can either add or subtract 1, and then store it back into the string. So the only other things that you have to know are you can't go negative, and I think the assignment asks you to make sure no one orders more than 10 of any item. So more than that, probably if you want to email me your code, I can take a look at it and comment it that way.
Okay.
That's probably the most efficient way of doing it. And of course, each line needs to have its own set of buttons and count value text field.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other questions? So, moving forward, let's talk about CSV files. So we're back here again, and we're going to write a CSV file, and this is going to be our first attempt at it. So typically in Excel, our row on top is a header row. And then we also have, so those are our column headings. And then we have our row headings. So we're going to start simply. And we're going to create some data. And it's going to be a two-dimensional list. And we're going to have a problem with our data, because the technique of a CSV file is comma separated values. Well, what happens if one of our values has a comma in it? We've got a problem. So that's why probably a long time ago, somebody came up with a module that understands these things. And it's a standard Python module called CSV. Let's define some players. If we're going to define players, we're going to have data for different players. So we're going to have a list of lists. So let's start a list. And in that list, we're going to put another list. And in that list is going to be first name, Mickey. And it's not mouse, it's mantle. And it's Mickey Mantle Jr. And I guess I don't know whether it was Mickey Mantle Jr. or not, but it works for this. And this looks like batting average. And I've made no attempt to make this data realistic or to fact check it. Next list is Hank Aaron. And he had a batting average of 350. Again, no idea whether this data is valid or not. And we had Roger Maris. Somebody can tell me about what year am I stuck in? I can't, but it's certainly been a while. That's the end of that. This kind of got lost over here by itself. Oh, yeah, that's right. I haven't indented this, so it would, that's correct. It would look like that. Or if you don't like that, you can do this. It doesn't matter. So here's my data. And we know now that we want to use context managers. And I didn't bother, I wish it wouldn't do that. I didn't bother defining a variable for this, so we're just going to call it players one.csv. Now, does Python care about this extension? Not really. Does PyCharm care about the extension? It kind of does, because it gives it a clue about how to open it. And certainly in Windows, Windows tends to recognize extensions for associations. Linux, I believe, couldn't care less about extensions. Hey, look what I found. I found something called new line. And instead of putting in a new line character, which would be default, I'm going to tell it don't do anything at the new line. Let's see what that does for it. Now I'm going to give, I'm going to create my file handle. And now it gets just a little tricky. I actually need a CSV handle. Call it CSV_out. And how do I create a CSV handle? I go to the CSV module and I ask it for a writer, a CSV writer, and it wants to know the file handle, not the file name, but the file handle, which is file_out. So that's something new. And given that, I can say CSV out dot write rows and pass to it a data structure, players. Okay. And one thing, really, what's wrong? Continuation, Continue on line 8. Oh. Blah, I guess I got it confused. There we go. Now it's unconfused. Okay, so it has its couple of little tricks. We have this new thing called a CSV writer. It needs a file handle. With it, you can, with this handle, you can now write as many rows as you need to express this data structure. Well, let's see what happens. And we get a new file called players1.csv. Notice that PyCharm thinks this is a special file. It puts a special symbol next to it. And that symbol assumes that you've included some kind of CSV module. I don't think it comes up as a module per se, but it does need a little extra help for this. And let's see what help we get. So notice that this is different than a TXT file. We get colors. And the colors show us that it understood that this needed to be broken up. So, and it also figured out a way of coping with the comma in Mantle, comma, Junior. And the way it coped with that is it double quoted it or quoted it. Doesn't matter if it's double or single. And that's why you don't do your own CSV file without using the CSV module. Because you don't want to have to do this in your code. You just want a module that understands how to do that. So if you compare this to this, you can see the transformation from a data structure into a CSV file. And I don't know if this allows associations open in. No, but I could open an Explorer and I could double click on it. And incidentally, if you haven't, in case I ran that one by you kind of quickly, right click, open in, Explorer shows you exactly where your file is and it highlights the file. So if I double click this, it should bring up an association, which in my case is LibreOffice. And presto, as if by magic, I have a spreadsheet. How amazing is that? It is. It's not that hard. And if you, I think that's the way Roger Maris spelled his name. Okay, so there's your link. There's a link between Python and Excel, or LibreOffice in my case. These are really numbers. They're not just strings, they're numbers, and you can see that also over here. These are numbers, so it recognizes that. Notice the problem that we saw before, that the numbers are right justified and the text is left justified. So that's where you run into some column heading issues of things not lining up unless you adjust for that. So it's all good. It really is. So we're going to close this, save it, save the CSV file. No, nope, let's not do that. All right, last program of the day. We're going to try to get this stuff back. So this is going to be a read CSV file 1. And you have choices of what you want to do to recover this file. And what we're going to do is we're going to read a CSV file that does not have a header on it, right? Because we didn't put a header on it. And since we know that this kind of data works well in a dictionary, we're going to try to create a dictionary out of the data that we read. Now, is there a dictionary in the data? No, it's a text file. It's a CSV file. But we're going to see if we can make a structure out of it. Of course, we're going to do with open. That's the way we like to do it. And yeah. So this is players1.csv. Notice PyCharm plays along with you. Gives you that as an option. This is going to be an RT as file underscore in, because we're consistent. And now we're going to see some new stuff. We need to create a CSV handle. And we do that by going into the CSV CVS is something different, isn't it? We go into the CSV library and we find something called a dictionary reader. And the dictionary reader needs to know about the file handle. And it also accepts something called field names. Well, it may say field names, but think about column headings. So what about if I wanted column headings that said first name and another column heading that said last name and another column heading that said batting average. And that's the end of my list of field names. Okay. What would happen if we printed CSV .in underscore in? What would we get out of that? Let's do that first. Okay, let's do that first. Let's see what we got. Oh, running out of time. Yeah, I forgot my colon over here. Well, no big deal if we have to finish this up next time. Wrong program. Huh. CSVN. Okay. We have an object, so that's not very helpful, is it? We know there's a dictionary reader object that exists at the hex memory address. Thank you so much, but not really useful. So what we would like is we would like to create a list. And the way we do that is something we haven't seen before. Well, that says we're going to create a list. And how are we going to create a list? Well, this is how we're going to do it. And I might need to explain this separately because it's new. CSV underscore in. What I'm going to do here is print players. So let's look first and then try to understand what in the world is going on over here, because it's something weird is going on over here. Let's see what we get. Okay. What we get is a list. How do we know it's a list? It starts with an open square bracket and finishes with a closed square bracket. What's in the list? What's in the list are several dictionaries. How many dictionaries? Well, here's the first one for Mickey Mantle. Here's the second one for Frank Aaron. Here's the third one for Roger Maris. Okay, each of those dictionaries has some good information in it. The key is first name. His first name is Mickey. The next key is last name. It's Mantle Jr., his batting average, 300. Oh, that became a string. That's not cool, but I guess that's the best it could do. And then it does the same thing for the other two players. So this thing is called a list comprehension. It's really cool. It has nothing to do with GUI 0. It has everything to do with Python, and it allows you to create lists in a loop that's all in one line. So we know about for row in CSV in means this must be an iterable, even though it just shows up as an object. And for every row, it creates a list element that's identical to the row. So we can look at that more next time and find out how to take the next step in making this thing a little more friendly, which it isn't right now. But this information has been built I guess I closed it already. This information has been built from this data by adding in the dictionary reader and by specifying the field names. What we'll do next time is we'll put the field names into the file, and then Excel will look prettier, and then it'll be easier to create them. All right, questions for today? Right.